In 1829, a sprawling stone fortress opened its gates, looming over Philadelphia with heavy Gothic towers and 30-foot-high perimeter walls. It looked like a medieval castle designed to evoke dread in anyone who approached it. But the architects who commissioned it? A group of idealistic reformers. And Quakers had the opposite intention. They looked at the prisons of the era where inmates faced public whippings in the stocks, and they wanted to abolish that old-world barbarism. They believed criminals were sick patients in need of a cure. So they conceived of a new kind of institution. They called it a penitentiary, the machine specifically engineered to produce penitence and spiritual salvation. To show the state's benevolence, the prison featured technological innovations practically unheard of at the time. Cells featured central heating, indoor running water, and flushing toilets, luxuries that even the President of the United States didn't have in the White House. These reformers were convinced they had found the key to rehabilitating the human soul, unaware that their specific combination of absolute silence and heavy stone would soon lead to a catastrophic psychological outcome. This floor plan shows their layout, a radial design arranged. The spokes of a wheel. These long cell block wings extended outward from the center. This created hundreds of individual silos, sealing each prisoner in private space. Cut off from the world, all those wings converged on a single central hub. This rotunda functioned as an omnipresent watchtower, a panopticon. Their guards could gaze down every corridor and observe everything without ever being seen. The massive stone facade was highly visible to the public, designed to keep society outside. But the true berries were on the inside, invisible psychological walls designed to trap the mind. This architecture operated as an active machine. Every corridor was calibrated to attack the prisoner's ego, eroding their sense of self long before the physical body began to decay. The isolation began the moment a new prisoner arrived. All personal possessions were taken. Their identity was replaced with a number, and their physical freedom was immediately severed. Guards then dropped a thick black hood over the prisoner's head. Blinded and disoriented, the inmate was led through the echoing corridors. They had no way to track their movements or map the facility. By the time the hood was removed, they were lost. Within the prison walls, stripped of all spatial awareness, the cell was a sensory void. The walls were thick enough to muffle any neighboring noise, and there were no windows looking out onto the grounds. The only natural illumination came from a single sharp sliver of pale light piercing through a narrow skylight. In the vaulted ceiling, a feature the architects called the Eye of God. This was the foundation of the Pennsylvania system. Inmates worked, ate, and slept in absolute solitude. There was no congregate labor, no shared meals, and most strictly enforced of all, a total prohibition on speaking. The founders thought this silence would bring peaceful reflection. Instead, it created a suffocating absence of stimuli. Stripped of all human contact and environmental input, the isolated mind had nothing left to process, leaving it to slowly cannibalize itself while Eastern State refined its method of isolation. The state of New York was developing a rival philosophy, the Auburn system. At Auburn, inmates spent their nights in tiny individual cells, but during the day they performed hard labor together. They operated under a strict rule of silence, marching in lockstep with obedience, enforced by the constant threat of the whip. The managers of Eastern State condemned the floggings and physical brutality of the Auburn system. They proudly marketed their method of separate confinement as a civilized, humane alternative because it broke no bones and drew no blood. In 1842, the author Charles Dickens visited the United States. He specifically requested a tour of Eastern State Penitentiary to investigate these claims of a humane reform. What Dickens found horrified him. He didn't see men finding quiet religious salvation. He saw severe neurological collapse. After speaking with the inmates, he wrote that the punishment was awful and dreadful, describing the prisoners as men buried alive. He recorded the specific symptoms of their mental decay, men trembling violently, forgetting their own names and staring blankly. When taken out of their cells, they would stagger drunkenly and quiver, their nervous systems completely derailed by the crushing weight of their solitude. Dickens realized that the absence of physical violence was an illusion. The Pennsylvania system was a profound atrocity. It was a slow, daily tampering with the mysteries of the brain, inflicting an immense invisible agony far worse than any physical scar. Eventually, the architecture of the separate system succumbed to basic logistics as crime rates rose. The prison became desperately overcrowded, with the volume of inmates losing their grip on reality. The strict enforcement of solitary confinement became impossible to maintain. By 1913, Eastern State officially abandoned its original philosophy. The facility transitioned into a standard congregate prison. Additional cell blocks were crammed between the original spokes, and inmates were soon freely mingling in the corridors and working in shed shops. The facility, meticulously designed for quiet spiritual reflection, ended up housing some of America's most infamous modern criminals, including the prolific bank robber Willie Sutton. The stone fortress finally closed its doors in 1970. Left to the elements, the structure rapidly descended into a physical ruin of collapsing roofs, peeling paint, and rusted ironwork. Today, the rotting, abandoned corridors stand as a physical reflection of the institution's legacy. The decaying architecture mirrors the failure of its original utopian promise. But the story of Eastern State doesn't end with its closure. While the physical walls of the facility are dead, the psychological mechanism it invented escaped into the modern world. The concept of solitary confinement was exported globally. Instead of a path to salvation, it was reproposed by modern justice systems as a standard disciplinary tool. This chart tracks the explosive growth of solitary confinement. Populations over time. From a single data point in Philadelphia in 1829, the practice has multiplied exponentially, now affecting tens of thousands of inmates worldwide. This is the central tragedy of the Eastern State experiment, a system proven by 19th century observers to cause absolute mental destruction, is tragically still in widespread use today. The enduring legacy of this experiment is the invisible psychological mechanism it left behind, a blueprint for isolation that continues to consume the human mind in the dark corners of the modern world.